Hello, and welcome to my presentation on dystopianism and its origins and evolutions. These are my goals, not really the most exciting slide in the world. And here is the table of contents. I have sectioned for readability. 1984 is by no means the first dystopian work, but it is the first one that was truly popular, which is why I'm sort of calling it the propagator of the genre. And even today, sales of it skyrocket with pretty much every government scandal, which shows that even more than half a century later, good things die hard. And is still not without its flaws. Mainly some social conventions that have not aged well, mostly surrounding race and women. And the tech present in it is also absolutely primitive by today's standards, like the telescreen, which seemed advanced back then, but nowadays it's not so hard for every house to have a flat screen TV. This sliding scale of idealism versus cynicism is very important to almost all creative works. It applies validly to all but the strangest of works, and genres usually cultivate some kind of, preferred audience that, that falls somewhere on that sliding scale, and they happen to prefer works that also fall in the same area they are in. Dystopianism happens to have cultivated for itself the audience that is, like the stuffy cynic in the corner. And while cynicism is the norm, there are exceptions throughout the genre. And many idealistic dystopian works have been made, and they have found their own little audience, and they usually go on to become cult classics. And the status quo usually features heavily in dystopianism as either an utterly unchangeable force that will inevitably win, or as something that can be changed with enough heroism. But both of those things, it should be fairly obvious where they fall on the scale, but the status quo is still important in dystopianism. So, dystopianism is a funny genre in that while it has a villain, often humanity is shown to be, is shown to shoulder just as much blame for the situation as the villain does. The original villain was, of course, Big Brother from 1984. His name is now synonymous with oppression and sinister behind-the-scenes evil. What really separates Big Brother from other villain types is that while he is a leader, he does not lead from the front, usually. And it instead reinforces the idea of, sort of mankind's inherent evilness that is almost omnipresent throughout the genre. Because, he can't run his whole little dystopian nation without help. And this villain is harder to fight than most others because there's not one single guy you can just take out. And that comes up as a point frequently in dystopian works. And no matter how many people will, claim that 1984 is not sci-fi, it really was. Anymore, though, like I said, it still seems a little dated. But the worst has actually been avoided by the novel, not featuring technology as a prominent cause of villainy. And they instead had it as sort of a tool of evil and not the root of it. And, tech, as I said, since they didn't make it nearly as prominent as it could have been, they prevented it from aging as poorly as it could have. And now we see dystopianism evolving into many new genres like cyberpunk. Almost all cyberpunk works have elements of dystopianism, but in a different way. They normally have a corporation as the villain, and the hero is usually a hard-boiled cyber detective who spoke in overly elaborate metaphors and was hooked on gin. And this portrayal came from gritty city noir styles popular during the early 50s and late 60s. And this genre is often cynical, but less so than normal dystopianism. And in story, corporate oppression can be presented the same way as government oppression. In fact, in cyberpunk especially, the two can be one and the same. One interesting thing that is not usually explored by authors, though, is the fact that you can draw some parallels between communism and capitalism this way. And in story, corporate oppression, this thing, there, finally worked. So dystopianism is a rather broad genre, but a few things were common amongst dystopian works. Early ones loved to feature paranoia, and this has given way to the more modern theme of triumph over impossible odds. The evil AI archetype became more common, and the theme of, something turned against its masters has also been, becoming quite popular as a result. So, old dystopia was often bleak and hopeless, while newer works are, often centered around trying to fight the dystopian regime. These two things may seem different, but they are actually likely to be found together. Anymore, you're likely to see a computerized villain who, despite making the world bleak, is still able to be fought. And as nostalgia grows, so do the number of works that seem to yearn for ye olden days. Many of these new works are just old rehashed plots, but sometimes you find a reconstruction work. Reconstructions point out all the flaws in a genre or setting and figure out how to make the setting plausible again. And new works continue to be put out that feature both reconstructions, nostalgia-laden rehashes, or even brand new works. And the genre is not going away anytime soon. And dystopianism was actually started by a Western country, namely England, but it really took off elsewhere, but it took more time because it's hard to translate a whole novel, and it started with a novel. And nonetheless, Japan, of all places, loves cyberpunk dystopia. The presence of Ghost in the Shell, for instance, really speaks for itself. Just a citation slide, nothing special. And now for the questions.
Okay.